Alright guys, so since the last time we worked on our Keeper app, we've learned a lot of new concepts such as props and mapping components and looping and React DevTools, arrow functions, map filter reduce. So let's go ahead and see if we can apply some of those things to improve our Keeper app. This is the Keeper app part 2. And you can go ahead and get hold of the starting code sandbox by going to the course resources. If you want to work on your local copy, then go ahead and download a copy of it and then run npm install as well as npm start in order to run it on a local server. But if you're working on it in Code Sandbox like I am, then go ahead and just fork your own copy. The goal of this challenge is very simple. All we want to do is to render all of the notes that currently live inside our notes.js as an array called notes into our Keeper app as separate note components. This is going to use a lot of the things that you learned in the previous lessons, especially props and mapping. So this is what the finished app should look like. And when you go into the notes.js file, if you add a new entry, you should see it pop up dynamically like this. And this is all possible because you're going to be mapping through this array. Go ahead and pause the video and try to give this challenge a go. And once you're done, head back over here and we'll walk through the solution together. All right, so first let's head into our components folder and take a look at our app.js. Here we've got the note component being rendered, and we're only asking for one of these components to be rendered. Now, at the moment, this component is completely hard-coded. It has a set phrase for the H1 and a set phrase for the paragraph. Now, that won't do if we want to use our custom notes from our notes.js. So first, let's go into our app.js and pass it some custom props. So the kind of things that we probably want to customize is the title of the note and the content of the note. So let's just create a prop called title and a prop called content. Now I'm just going to go and move this existing title and existing content over as the values of those props, like so. And this way, when I go ahead and look inside my React DevTools, inside my note component, I'll be able to see that I've got two props being passed over to the note component, which I can then pick up inside my note.js. So inside my note function, which is being called effectively from my app.js, I can receive some properties. And this object props is going to contain both of these properties, title and content. So I can now insert it into my H1 inside a set of curly braces, and I can inject that as props.title and do the same with my content. So props.content. And these two properties should in fact work when I peek at my note because I'm using the right names of the properties. And frequently you get mismatches in terms of typos when you're trying to access a property and you miss out on the content, or you get typos when you are passing a prop over in terms of the key and you get missing content. But with our React DevTools and being able to view the props, it should help us debug any issues on that front. All right, so now that we've got our note rendering some custom content using props, we can now think about how we can render multiple notes, because our notes.js has lots of different notes with different titles and different content. One way is we could create lots of these note components, but of course, now that we know all about the mapping strategy, then the easiest way is to use the map function. In order to map through the array of notes, we first have to export it from this file where it lives. So export default notes. And then let's go ahead and catch it over in our app.js. So let's import notes from /notes. All right, so now that we've got access to this array called notes, and we can log it to see its value, which is just currently 4 objects with different titles and content. Given that we've got this array, we can then go into our app and replace this single note with a whole bunch of notes generated from a map function. So let's go ahead and tap into the notes array that we just got hold of, call the map function, and inside the map function, we're going to pass it a function that is going to create notes. So this create notes needs to get a single note item passed into it. And once it does, though, it's going to return a note component that is going to have some props being sent over. Remember, the props that we defined previously were title and content. So let's add a title prop and let's add a content prop. So the title is going to be based on the note item that gets passed over to this function. So it's going to be note item dot title. And let's just check inside our notes.js that indeed that those are the names of the properties, title and content. So note item.title and note item.content. And of course, because this is JavaScript code, it needs to be wrapped inside a set of curly braces to be valid JSX. Now that we've got this function create notes that takes a single note item and renders a custom note component, we can pass that create note function into our map. So now if we wrap this whole line inside a set of curly braces, then it should be able to render our notes with different titles and different content using the data that we've got inside our notes.js. Now, there's a couple of things to remember though. Remember that whenever we want to map or loop through an array in order to create dynamic React components, such as these notes, we always have to add a key prop. And that key prop has to be unique amongst all of the same components. So there can be no note component that has the same key. Luckily, inside our note.js, we've also got a key property defined, so we can just set this as the note item.key. This way, we clear any of the errors that are in our console, and we're making React happy with the job that we're doing. Now, the next thing to note is we learned about arrow functions, right? So we can vastly simplify and cut down on our code, and in fact, I would argue make it easier to read. So let's go ahead and do that. So first, I'm going to move this function from the outside into the inside of my map function. So everything still works the same, but now it's just being defined inside another function and at the position where it's being used. Next, I'm going to turn this into an anonymous function by deleting the name of the function. So everything still works. And then I'm going to simplify things even further by turning this into an ES6 arrow function. So I'm going to delete the function keyword, add a fat arrow between the input and the body of the statement. And then, because I've only got a single item being returned, which gets treated effectively as a single line of code, I can actually also delete my return keyword as well as the curly braces that enclose the entire block of code. And instead, I can simply just tag this on at the end as a single line of code, like so. So now everything still works exactly the same as before, but we're using our arrow function in order to pass a function that maps through our array of notes, and for each of the notes inside the array, it's going to carry out this functionality, which is to create a new note using the properties from that note item. Did you manage to complete the challenge? If not, be sure to review some of the previous lessons that we covered, including props, as well as mapping components. So in the coming lessons, we're going to level up our skills in React development even more so that we can add more functionality to our Keeper app. Things such as how to handle user inputs, how to dynamically add new notes from the user inputs, how to deal with forms, how to delete notes, and much, much more. So once you're done reviewing the code here and completing the challenge on your side, then head over to the next lesson and we're going to learn about conditional rendering. So for all of that and more, I'll see you there.